In this demonstration, I'm going to create a report that consists only of report items that are not bound to data. So I'll add a new report to the project. And I'll name it Report Items Demo. And I'll start by adding a rectangle to hold the report items that I want at the top of the report. I'll just position it at the very top left-hand corner here. Now the rectangle is just a container to hold items together. I can move items around as a group. I can copy them as a group and paste them into another report. Maybe I want to have the same report header on every single report. I can just copy and paste. And it's just a way to keep things together. So after I position the rectangle, I can drag the edges to resize it however wide I need it or however tall I need it. I can also set properties for the rectangle if I like. On the one hand, if I'm using it only as a container, I can configure the properties so that the borders aren't visible, and that's the default behavior. Right now, if I click away from the rectangle so that it's no longer selected, you can see that the edges are this light dashed line. If I were to go preview the report currently, then I would not see anything. So this is the rendered report, which is completely blank. So even though the rectangle exists, it's not visible. But if I want to make it visible, then I need to set the borders of the rectangle. So I'll select inside of the rectangle so that the edges are selected here. And then I can go to the Properties window and change the border properties. I have the border color. And I can set the default color to maroon. I can set the border style default to a solid. And then I can set the border width. I'll keep that as a 1-point width here. Anytime you're working with border properties, you set the default primarily, but if you need something to be different, maybe the left side of the border or the right side of the border, the top or the bottom can all have different properties. Once we have our rectangle configured, then we're ready to start adding items to it. So I'll open up the toolbox and I'll start by adding a text box. This will hold the report title, and I'll position that in the top left corner of the rectangle, and then I'll resize the text box a bit to fit my title, and I'll start typing sales by year. Now with the text box selected, I want to change the size of the font. My toolbar right now doesn't show the font sizes, but there's a button here on the toolbar Options, that shows me all of the other buttons that aren't visible currently on the toolbar. And one of those is the font size. So I'll change this to 18 point, and I'll make it bold. Then I can resize the text box again to fit the actual size of my text. Next, I'll add an image. I'll just drag and drop it from the toolbox and place it into the rectangle next to the text box. And here we get a dialog box prompting us for information about the image. Images can come from 3 different places. The default is an embedded image, which means the image will be imported from the file system and then embedded into the report. Or I can create a reference to an image that's stored somewhere else, maybe stored as a separate item on the report server or on a web server. Or I can use the database source whenever I have a query that gets generated to retrieve images from a database. In the example I want to build now, I'm going to use the embedded source to import an image that I have. So after I locate the image, I'll click Open. And when I click OK here, the image will be embedded. Now it's very small here. I can just drag the edges and enlarge the image. And reposition it. And there we go. The next thing I want to add is a line. So I'll drag and drop that and place it inside the rectangle. And placement of the line is just the beginning of the process for me. I need to straighten it out. drag it from end to end of my rectangle. And then I want to enhance the line. So with it still selected, I can go to the Properties window, and then I can scroll down to the Line Color property, and I'll change the color to maroon to make it fit the scheme that I have going here. And you can see that there's also a line style property as well as a line width, and I'm going to change this to a width of 10 point. My last step here is to add in a subreport. So I'll drag and drop that in. Now a subreport is simply a full report that exists elsewhere, maybe in the same project that I'm working with, or maybe it's on the report server. And when I embed a subreport inside of a parent report like this, I'll get everything that's defined in that report except anything that I have in the page header or the page footer in that particular subreport. So only the body of that report is rendered within the parent report. Now I'm going to resize it here, and that's just for making space available as needed to other items if I were to continue building on this report. The subreport size is not dictated by the amount of space that I allocate here. This is just simply a placeholder, and however much space that the subreport requires within my parent report here, it will take whatever it needs to render properly. To configure the subreport, I need to right-click on the subreport here and select Subreport Properties. I can give it a name if I like, and that makes it a lot easier to identify which subreport it is if I'm going to create a parent report that has multiple subreports. So I'll call this Sales by Year by Territory. Now the naming convention here is that much like our shared data sources or shared data sets, basically any object that we create with a name inside of reporting services has to have a name that has no spaces embedded in it and always has to start with a letter. Now because the report that I want to use is already in the project, it's available in the drop-down list. If it were in a different project in the same solution, I would need to preface the name of the report with the name of the project and then a slash and then the name of the report. You notice that the RDL file extension is not included here. Also, if the subreport isn't contained currently in my project, maybe it's on the report server or maybe it's not even created yet, I need to specify the name of the folder where it's going to be located. And I would do that by starting with the home folder, which is always represented with a /, and then let's say that I had a folder called Sales. So I'd put the name of that folder there and then another /, and then the name of the report. I'm going to remove that here because that's not necessary in this particular case. So I have the name, I've referenced the subreport, I click OK, and I'm done. All I need to do now is to preview the report. And here I have a report that's created completely from report items that don't have any data set association. I have a text box, an image, a line, a rectangle as a container for all of those items, and then a subreport.